This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Welcome, listeners, to a very special new podcast edition here on the Place to Be Nation network of podcasts. I am Greg Phillips. With me is my cohort, Nick Duke. We are the Hard-Traveling Fanboys, and we're bringing a little comics love to the podcast universe.
That's absolutely right. We are here carrying over. You may have read our wildly successful and wildly financially profitable series of comic book opinion columns on placetobenation.com. Once again, that's placetobenation.com.
That's right. Click on the comics tab, Hard Traveling Fanboys, and you will read our consistently published columns going back 2 years now? 3 years now.
3 years, yeah. I think we've been hanging around since about 2013.
And we've never missed a week.
We've literally had something. I mean, I think we were just writing a column right before we started this podcast, as a matter of fact.
That's right. We actually decided in the middle of writing this column why not just do a podcast? Instead of treating everyone with our written words, which can be cold and distant, let's let them listen to our beautiful, soulful, Barry White-like voices over the airwaves, or however you're listening to this.
See, I don't actually have a Barry White-like voice, but Greg here has a brief broadcasting career to fall back on. Why don't you hit him with a little bit of that Greg Phillips radio voice?
The Pike County Commission met today and passed the budget for the 2013 fiscal year. Why 2 years ago? I have no idea. For WTBF, Greg Phillips signing off.
We should turn that into Warner Brothers and see if they'll cast you as Alan Scott, because if you remember, Alan Scott was a radio reporter. That was his original gimmick.
And if I get that gimmick, I am going to give you a job as my Doiby Diggles.
Oh, my God, the dream role of all things. And you may have noticed we're already using words like gimmick and things like that, because yes, we're going to cross-pollinate a little wrestling lingo. As a matter of fact, in a wrestling podcast reference, I've even got Herschel the Wonder Dog sitting right here with me as we record.
Herschel the Wonder. I like it. Are you going to talk about Cesaro during the course of this podcast?
I will talk about Cesaro more than any person has ever talked about any other person in the history of people. Cesaro is the greatest thing since anything, and should be pushed above all else, and it doesn't make any sense why he's not.
And don't forget about the Broken Skull IPAs.
The Broken Skull IPAs.
Anyway, We're getting way off topic, but the point is, we're the Hard-Traveling Fanboys, named, of course, if you haven't picked it up after all these years, we were named after the famous run of Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams comic books in the early 70s, Green Arrow, Green Lantern. We love comics. The only thing that we love as much as comics, other than our families, of course, and even that's questionable at times, is, of course, professional wrestling. But this is not a pro wrestling podcast.
College football, probably.
College football, pro football, things like that. But this is nothing to do with those things. This is comics. And we're going to mix in some little things here or there. We're also going to trip over our words several times, because I must tell you all, we're doing this podcast, in all honesty, out of sheer laziness.
Yes.
We're just too lazy, because we write during our daily lives. I commute an hour to work each day, so I come back. I don't want to write when I get home. I want to talk. I want to soothe people. I want to let people hear how I don't really know what I'm talking about at a given time.
And at a certain point, it also became a scheduling issue for us, because Greg was mentioning, your hour-long commute that you have, so that's an hour each day you lose. We're an hour apart in terms of time zone difference. And then I had, last October, which is consequently around the time we stopped doing the column full time, our second daughter was born. And so time to sit down and type out a conversation, which was taking 2-3 hours at times before we ever edited the column to include our ultra hip pop culture photo references. It just, at a certain point, we had to make a decision whether, if it was a good time investment to keep typing out a conversation as opposed to just recording the damn thing.
That sound you hear in the background is not a massive fart over and over again. It's actually Herschel the Wonder Dog snoring, I believe. So
can you hear him?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. Well, we do the best we can here.
That's right.
Production values being the first show, we do what we can.
And basically the way this is going to work is pretty much the same as our columns. We plan to have one of these a week going up, hopefully on Thursday nights, sometimes on Fridays, and basically we will have a different theme for each week of the month. For instance, this week our theme will be Countdown, which will be a continuation of our Countdown column, which has us basically doing top 5 lists of our favorite things or least favorite things in comics or comics-related media. Nick, tell them about the rest of our lineup.
Well, as you know, if you've, again, read our ultra-successful columns and are one of the dozens and dozens of people moving over to the podcast, you'll know that in addition to Countdown, we also have something we call Off the Page, which kind of takes a look at different adaptations of comic books throughout the years. In the past, we've done video games, we've done
Board
movies,
games?
we've done board game. Yeah, we did do a board game. You're right. I forgot about that. TV shows. I believe with the podcast format, we're going to transition that into a little bit more of a commentary track style setup. So you'll be looking more primarily at just the TV shows and the movies, but we may sprinkle in some of those other things as well.
That's right.
In addition to that, we're also going to be continuing the Long Book Hunters, which is another Green Arrow pun that we ripped off shamelessly from DC Comics. The name lifted, of course, from the famous Mike Rowe Longbow Hunters. And the concept of that one is essentially we will be reviewing each month for you a trade paperback from our extensive backlog of trade paperbacks. And on this one, we're going to start cheating a little bit because we're actually going to be using some digital services to expand our library. But anything we review, we promise, will be available in trade so that you don't have to worry about finding a way to get your hands on it.
Absolutely. We're staying committed to the original concept. We're just using some creative means to get around the logistics of getting stuff in each other's hands. And it also gives us a chance to erase any inkling of a perceived bias against Marvel Comics by us. We have no such bias. Love both companies, DC, Marvel. Love Image. Love Valiant. To a lesser extent, love the Sunday Funnies,
Dark Horse.
Dark Horse, yes. Archie. What else is there?
Haven't we discussed
Icon.
before how there are no actual Archie comics readers? I feel like this is a topic from another time, though.
We'll get into
Does
that.
anybody remember that conversation?
We had that conversation, yes. That was I think that was a quote-unquote behind closed doors conversation, though. But I'm not 100% sure. But anyhow, that's beside the point. We'll also be on occasions delving into our giant size concept, which, if you're familiar with that, is on months that have a 5th publishing day, which for us will be Thursday now. We will gather a wider array of Place to Be Nation contributors to do kind of more, I would say, large-scale projects. For instance, you may remember the legendary, ultra-geeky Place to Be Nation comic book draft, which you can find in the archives at placetobenation.com.
And if you don't remember the comic book draft, I think actually if you tune your internet radio to a certain frequency, you can probably hear Tim Capel continuing to explain his X-Men pitch somewhere. He's actually been going as long as Curtis Axel has been in the 2015 Royal Rumble. So pretty good run for Tim right now.
That's right, and we love him for it. Quite frankly, that's the, if I could take all the problems in my life and replace them with Tim reading his X-Men pitch, I would gladly do that in a heartbeat.
Absolutely.
And we will probably be having Tim on the podcast in the near future. But that's, let's get back to the topic at hand. So tonight, we're debuting The Rundown. The Rundown in podcast form.
We're debuting the Countdown.
You're right. Countdown. I'm getting our own titles wrong of our columns. That's how invested we are. We want to make sure you, the listening public, understands the difference between Countdown and Rundown. So that's why I got it wrong, and then Nick corrected me, you see? So, anyway, the Countdown is tonight. That's correct. And we will be counting down our top 5 runs of the New 52. Now, to give a little backstory, in 2011, DC Comics relaunched its comic book universe in an initiative called the New 52. Brand new continuity for the most part, all new directions for titles for the most part, and it proved to be very successful, somewhat, temporarily. As a lot of people know, now DC is gearing up for another, not reboot, but another company-wide initiative called DC Rebirth. And undoubtedly part of that is due to some of the failures of the New 52. However, we're not here to talk about failures. We're here to talk about the successes of the New 52. For all the misses, and Lord knows there were a lot of misses, from Suicide Squad to Teen Titans to Superman, but in the midst of the misses, there were quite a few hits as well, and we're here to talk to you about some of our favorite, or really our top 5 favorite runs from the last 4 years now. So
yeah, almost going on 5. I think the idea here is to kind of say, for those of you who may have dismissed the New 52 on principle, this is us kind of saying, well, if you're not going to give the larger universe as a whole a shot, maybe here are some runs, some stories that you should pick up. And for reference, we're playing kind of fast and loose with the term run. Because, some people will say that a run is a specific pairing of one writer and one artist for however long they're on the book. We're not necessarily taking that approach. We're going to take an approach of, as long as one writer or artist was on that book, we're counting that as one run, even if they worked with different people during that time. I can't think of any artists that stayed on without a writer change, but if there were, that would be eligible for our lists as well. But before we jump into that, we actually have, because we're doing this as a podcast now and can afford to be a little topical, each week we're actually going to bring you just a little taste, not much, because we're going to have a podcast every month dedicated to news around the comic book world. But each week we're going to give you a little taste of what Greg and I are reading and watching in the comic book world. So, Greg, anything caught your eye last week, couple weeks, anything?
Well, I mean, as is eternally the case with me, I'm always behind on single issues. So I have actually been reading the Superman Lois and Clark title from Dan Jurgens and Lee Weeks, and catching up on that. I actually just finished issue 5 yesterday, as of the day of this podcast, and I've really enjoyed it. It's been to me my favorite Superman comics that I've read in a while, probably since Unchained. To me, it gets to the heart of Superman. It gets exactly what I want out of a Superman story, and it kind of erases some of the bad taste that the New 52 Superman stories have left in my mouth, so to speak. And other than that, also I have finished Jessica Jones on Netflix.
I have not yet, which is surprising because I'm a much bigger fan of the comic concept than I think you are. So it's interesting to hear that you finished it. I think mainly because of free time and the constraints on mine right now.
Right,
I got to finish that at some point and then dive in, of course, to the second season of Daredevil. But I have not had a chance yet to do either of those things.
Yeah, I'm really interested to get your thoughts on Jessica Jones because I've never read a Jessica Jones comic. I've never encountered everything I know about the character. Literally everything comes from what you've told me over the years. So I really enjoyed the show, but I'm interested to see how somebody who's more familiar with the characters reacts to it.
I've seen the first 5 episodes, and I really like what I've seen. I just have got to find the time, carve out the time to finish it. But
I hope that you'll end up loving it because to me it got a lot better as it went along. Like by the end of the season, it was one of my favorite Marvel things that they've done in any medium. So that was great. I'm 5 episodes into Daredevil season 2, and it's been good too. I think the last episodes 3 and 4 were excellent. Episodes 1 and 2 were good, but had some things that threw me off a little bit, but still very good. So yeah, that's pretty much what and of course, every week I watch The Flash, Arrow, Legends of Tomorrow, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Walking Dead, etc. So
Fear the Walking Dead.
Fear the Walking Dead now, I'm sorry. Yep. I haven't actually. I'm actually 2 weeks behind on that. I've downloaded last week's episode and I have DVR'd this week's episode.
So I'm up to date on Flash and Arrow, and that's pretty much it. I haven't watched any of this season of Fear the Walking Dead, and I haven't watched any Legends of Tomorrow since my epic trip to Dallas, Texas for WrestleMania 32. Some of those exploits have already been detailed in other podcasts, and we won't get into we won't get into that here. But I would be interested to get your take. I know last week's Flash episode kind of caused a little bit of a kerfluffle among some in the geek community, and I got to be honest, man. After checking it out, I checked it out a couple days after it aired, and so I was kind of outside that Twitter backlash. But after checking it out, I really don't understand the complaints at all. It doesn't make much sense to me. People who complained about that particular storyline.
Yeah, I feel like the people, a lot of the people, not all of them, there are people that had issues with the taking of the Speed Force scene, which I get that more so, but I don't get the people who were upset about and we'll go ahead and put a spoiler warning here, so if you don't want to hear spoilers of last week's Flash episode, please skip ahead probably, I'd say, 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, and we'll be done with this.
Yeah.
But to me, so spoiler. I think there were a lot of people upset about the seeming revelation of Jay Garrick as having always been, or this Flash version of Jay Garrick having always been evil, or either not existing. And I think that's a misread of the episode.
That's what I was going to say. I think the people who were saying that are being overly reactionary, because I think the entire intent was to show that Hunter Zolomon and Jay Garrick were separate people.
Are not the same person. Yes. Exactly. Yep, I agree completely. And I think in a few one creator in particular was upset, I think, by the imagery of Jay's helmet representing something bad or what have you. But again, we don't have the backstory on that yet, and I'm not 100% sure, but I'm fairly confident that the man in the Iron Mask is the real Jay Garrick of Earth 2. And that the helmet is the real Jay Garrick's helmet. But that's neither here nor there. We haven't really been there yet and seen exactly where the show's writers plan to take us. But it was another example of just the difficulty of being a creator in the comic book world nowadays, whether it's in comics, movies, TV. It's so difficult because now we're seeing even accomplished creators reacting like fanboys, and not letting stories play out, and not waiting for things. For the old online wrestling axiom of let it play out and see where it goes. But truly, nobody is willing to do that anymore in the world of comics.
And it's especially frustrating coming from creators who have theoretically, you would think, have been through this kind of thing themselves, telling long form stories that people react poorly to in a moment and don't let the full context of what's happening wash over them, And
right.
it's almost like, comic book creators cannibalizing one another, and it's really disappointing to see, some of those high profile creators, and we can go ahead and say Mark Waid, I think, is the one we're both
who's a wonderful creator, but it's the same. And what's upsetting about it, he can have everybody can have their opinions or what have you, but the problem is when he reacts in such a way, it sends a message to fandom that's how you react to things. Snap judgments on everything, which is unfortunately the culture we live in today. I mean, just watch ESPN for a few hours and you'll see it. Everything snap judgments. Everything is either the worst or the best thing ever, which I feel like we'll get into in a future podcast. But yeah, very unfortunate.
Now, that actually brings up an interesting question, Greg. If somebody were to watch something and think it were the best thing ever, what would they say? I mean, is there something, a particular phrase, or even a chant they might use to describe a sense of enjoyment for something?
Well, let me ask my good friend over here, Jim, what he would say. Oh, you want my opinion now, do you? Oh, that's real nice. Yeah, I guess they might say, "This is awesome. This is awesome. Just shoot me in the damn head." I'm serious, folks.
A little wrestling taste for you guys once again. But, so Flash has been interesting. Arrow's been good as well, I think. I actually am in the minority, and that I think this season of Arrow has been a marked improvement from last season of Arrow, and I enjoyed last season of Arrow more than most people did.
Me too.
I'm interested to see where it continues to go, and how they plan on resolving the Oliver Felicity issues, because I know some people in fandom are not invested at all in that relationship, and I personally I can't get enough of it. And I'm hoping we are unabashed
Olicity shippers, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
And have been for a long time.
And we were also unabashed. Oh God, what would the term even be? Batty? That's a bad one. We're not going to use that.
We're not going to use batty. No.
We preferred the romantic pairing of Barry Allen and Patty Spivot on The
Right.
Flash, and others did not feel that way. So we were both kind of bummed to see Patty written off the show in such an abrupt fashion. But
An abrupt fashion, yeah. And we so we're big fans of Felicity. And granted, I think that her writing this season has been a little odd at times, the writing for her character, but no, I've really loved this season, and I thought it was really interesting how they hit us with probably one of the worst Arrow episodes, the one with the bee lady in it.
yes, the Bug-Eyed Bandit, I believe.
Bug-Eyed Bandit, yes.
Mm.
And then they came back the next week with one of the best episodes, which featured the death of a major character that I won't spoil here.
Yes, we will not get into the spoilers for that episode, just because that literally was built up for the entire season. So
Yes, to spoil that would be to spoil the season. So.
Yes. But in terms of what I'm reading right now, I'm watching pretty much the same stuff Greg's watching. Greg and I both run about 3 to 4 weeks behind on our books. In terms of, I've got a good little stack I'm trying to work through. So while we may delve into the occasional TV or movie spoiler, we're highly unlikely to be spoiling anything in the books that you haven't read, just because we run so far behind.
Yeah, I'm a good. On some books, I'm 3 months behind. On some books, I'm not behind at all, and on some books, I'm 3 or 2 weeks behind. So
I'm about 3 weeks behind. I got about a good stack sitting next to the Duke throne in there, and tomorrow when I go pick up my books for tomorrow, I'll be an even month behind.
He's talking about the commode.
Yes, indeed. But one thing that was interesting that happened to me last week when I went to the comic shop, and I thought I'd bring this up because, we do like to tackle that. We both bristle a little bit at that idea that we have been biased in the past, to favor DC Comics over Marvel Comics. So let me tell you what happened to me last week when I went to pick up my pull list. Went to the comic shop, and for the first time in I don't know how long, did not walk out with a single DC Comics title. Bought exclusively Marvel books last week. So that was an interesting thing for yours truly.
Ben Morse, your check is in the mail, sir.
Ben Morse, your check is in the mail. Oh my God! Whenever we start doing Long Book Hunters and start doing free advertising for Marvel Unlimited, I'm hoping the old editor of Marvel.com will give us, grease the pockets a little bit for that free Marvel Unlimited publicity we're going to provide to our dozens and dozens of listeners. But in terms of actually reading stuff, a couple books that stood out to me, and I'm not even sure when these books came out, to be honest, because I'm so far behind, but read the first issue of the excuse me, the first issue of the Dan Abnett Aquaman. And I think you and I discussed this off the air about a week ago, and I absolutely loved it. I know there were a lot of people who were really down on the Cullen Bunn run, and I was a little bit higher on it than most probably, but this Abnett issue, in one issue, already set the tone for what appears to be a next great run. In a way, I feel kind of bad for the guy, because it felt like he was trying to give people a clean jumping on point, and I feel like he's going to have to do it just again in a couple of issues with Rebirth coming up, But I'm geeked for that one, man, and I can't wait to see what Abnett brings to the table from here on out for Aquaman and Mira, who is absolutely back as the co-lead of the book. If you were concerned about Mira not taking a lead role, don't be concerned about that anymore. She's going to be what appears to be a major focus of that book going forward.
Our mutual friend Todd Weber also had very kind words about that book, Aquaman 40, and he's a longtime Aquaman fan. So between you and him, 50, sorry. Yes, between you and him, you two have gotten me sufficiently excited about picking that one up, possibly, or at least getting the trade whenever it comes out.
And then the other one that I have thoroughly enjoyed, and I've always enjoyed this title in its various incarnations, but I think the recent reboot, the renumbering of it, has brought it an energy that it hasn't had in a while, and that's Brian Michael Bendis' Miles Morales title that he's doing right now, which is simply titled Spider-Man, the adjectiveless Spider-Man. First 3 issues have been phenomenal. Miles fits right in the main Marvel universe, moving over from the now deceased Ultimate Universe, and I can't wait to see what happens with the book going.
Has he kept his backstory from the Ultimate Universe, or have they kind of finagled it and redone it?
That hasn't been directly addressed in terms of, is he still inspired by the death of Peter? Does he remember the Ultimate Universe? That kind of thing. They did retcon a couple things. Specifically, there was a key storyline in the Ultimate Universe where Miles' mother died. And it was kind of his first exposure to the idea that there were consequences to his heroic actions,
Mm-hmm.
And they used the Secret Wars event to restore his mother to life. So he's got both of his parents now.
Okay, interesting. And that has been the Marvel Minute with Greg and Nick. No, we're kidding. We love Marvel. We love DC. And we're kind of wanting to do that every podcast to let you guys know what we've been watching, if anything stood out in our minds. I'm enjoying all the comic book TV right now to varying degrees. And of course, we've got the next big Marvel movie, Civil War, coming out soon. And we'll both be going to see that opening weekend, and we'll have our thoughts right here on the podcast afterwards.
This will actually be the first Marvel movie I haven't seen on Thursday night in quite some time. I'm actually waiting until Friday, like the rest of you humanoids.
Yeah. See, Nick, you and I are just wired differently on this, because you love the opening night experience, and I hate the opening night experience.
I feel like your opening night experiences have been unfairly colored by the fact that both of us had several opening night experiences in one of the worst movie towns in America, which is Troy, Alabama. Since leaving Troy, I've had nothing but good experiences at opening nights.
Yeah, it's just, I'm getting more antisocial as I age, and so the constant chatter, and to me it's worse now because of the cell phone problem of people that just can't resist pulling out their cell phone in the middle of the movie, and your eyes, if you're not in the front row, your eyes are naturally drawn to that little light going up on the person's phone, and it draws you away from the screen and distracts you, and then I start getting really angry inside, but then I don't want to say anything.
See, that's the thing. I actually find I have that problem worse if I don't go opening night, because generally speaking, the opening night audiences are the people who are most excited to see the movie and who are most kind of locked into the screen and locked into the experience from the moment, the credits roll, the opening credits roll. Whereas going with a more general audience, you get people who are more distracted and kind of there to socialize less than to see, the next installment of whatever their favorite, whatever the comic book property may be. So, just a different take on that. But with all that being said, so let's dive into our topic of the week. Like we said, we're going to talk about our top 5 New 52 runs, except we have one major caveat that I'll let Greg explain.
Yes, we are counting down our top 5 New 52 runs, but we are excluding the legendary Batman run of Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. Think of it as an honorary number 1, because if we had put our list together without that caveat, our list probably would have been very similar, and they would have been exactly the same at the top. And they may be still, because that's the other thing that we need to let you know. We don't vet our lists ahead of time.
We do not.
We don't compare our order. We don't compare notes, anything like that. We go in blind and we react as the orders come in. But we are not counting Snyder and Capullo's Batman, which you can read all about at placeToBeNation.com in our last Giant Size Hard-Traveling Fanboys column, in which Russell Sellers, Tim Capel, and Todd Weber joined. Actually, Tim didn't. It was just Russell and Todd on this one. Joined us in verbally filleting Mr. Snyder and Mr. Capullo for their wonderful contributions to the Batman.
I mean, let's be honest. I think the gap between their run and whatever other run we might have considered for number 2 was so wide that we felt like, hey, let's get another thing on the list and let's just do that. It's the comic book equivalent of, if we were doing a countdown of the top 5 comic book movies, we would just agree not to include Nolan's trilogy, the holy trilogy as I call it, because it's it's a cut above for both of us, I think.
It's better. So anyway, with all that being said, I'm going to kick our list off with my number 5 selection, which is Superman Unchained, a maxi series by Scott Snyder and Jim Lee that came out a couple years ago. And I hope that I used the term maxi series properly. I believe I did, because it was I believe a 10, 12 issue run, something like that.
It's hard to remember with that one because it was solicited for a certain number of issues, and if I remember correctly, it got actually wound up being cut down a couple of issues. Is that right?
I think that's correct. Yeah, there were a lot of delays, of course, because it's a Jim Lee monthly title. There were a lot of delays, which is an issue he's owned up to in the past. He knows it. He knows about it and everything. But to me, I'm okay with it. As somebody that traditionally buys trades anyway, and as somebody who was struggling with financial issues at the time, I have no issue with delays because I would rather them get the final product right than rush something out with subpar or substandard work. So for me,
for something like Unchained, that's the case. But I can understand. I'll give you the flip side of that. Secret Wars, last year, towards the tail end of last year, Marvel was basing their entire company-wide relaunch off of this one event. And so when that event had delays, it kind of caused this weird in-between period where you were ready to go with books set in a new continuity, but you hadn't wrapped up telling the story of how the new continuity came to exist.
Sure,
With something like Unchained that stands a little bit more, on its own, I think it's okay, but I think there are instances where those delays can actually be very, very harmful.
I would agree. That's fair. But in this case, they took their time. Jim Lee in particular took his time, and the results were staggering. I mentioned earlier in this podcast that the New 52 had numerous missteps with the character of Superman, to the point that I think it would be fair to call the first 2 years of Superman in the New 52 an unmitigated disaster. From the main title, Superman, to Action Comics, particularly right after Grant Morrison left, these titles were just left in shambles. And Superman in particular went through so many creative teams, so many weird status quo shifts that did not serve the character well. Superman as angsty, Superman as guilt-ridden, angry, quitting the Daily Planet, which has happened in the past, but doing it abruptly and becoming a blogger, which I kind of rolled my eyes at as a journalist, but I have my own personal former journalist, and completely marginalizing the character of Lois Lane, who is my favorite character in the Superman mythos, taking Perry White and making him irrelevant. There were a lot of moves that were bad about New 52 Superman. But in the midst of all that, Scott Snyder took time on the side while doing Batman to hook up with my favorite comic book artist, Jim Lee, just because nobody does iconic superhero stuff better than Jim Lee. And they got together and they told a Superman story that would work in continuity, but could also work out of continuity. If you had never picked up a New 52 Superman book, you could pick up Superman Unchained right now, and it will make perfect sense to you. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was the best Superman book of the New 52 run. Superman Lois and Clark is giving it a run for its money. I know a lot of people are really high on Greg Pak's Action Comics run. I wasn't quite as high on it in the few issues that I tried. And then Jeff Johns had a nice little run in there, but it didn't last long enough. Unchained is excellent. You get a story of Superman meeting for lack of a better term, almost a reverse Superman, a Superman who has a very similar background, or a character that has a very similar background, also tries to do the right thing, but for different reasons. And in some ways, it's Superman meeting the Frank Miller version of Superman, who is subservient, seemingly anyway, to the U.S. government, more of a company man than this Superman. You get Lois Lane in a major role playing a hero character who makes a huge difference. You get a manipulative Lex Luthor who isn't one-dimensional. To me, it's a great distillation of a lot of different eras of Superman. If you prefer Silver Age, it works. If you prefer the 90s era that I love, it works. If you like the John Byrne era, it works. If you like the 2000s era of Superman, it works. So I think Superman Unchained is a run that will hold the test of time as one of the best modern Superman stories.
Is it fair to say that of all the New 52 Superman stories that were told, Unchained is the one that feels the most unlike a New 52 story?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say that and Lois and Clark are the two.
Well, Lois and Clark, obviously, because it's using the pre-New 52
Yes.
Superman.
Yeah, even I thought Jeff Johns' run on the main title kind of got back to a little bit of the old
I was
feeling
gonna
of
say
Superman,
that.
but even
It felt
Yeah.
like Johns was almost trying to reintroduce some of those elements, whereas Unchained just kind of assumed they had been there all along, if that makes any sense. Like, just
Exactly,
treated it
yeah.
as if, like, you had the New 52 and you had those elements, but you also had all the other elements that you know and love and didn't want to let go.
to the degree that they deliberately didn't address the specifics that weren't important to the story. They
Yes.
didn't address, Clark being a blogger. They didn't address Morgan Edge or whatever running the Daily Planet. They didn't address Lois's brush with superpowers or any of that stuff. They went in and they didn't address whatever Lex had been doing prior to the book. They just went in, they told the story, and like you said, it's like you're dropping in on a continuity that could be New 52 or non-New 52, but it certainly felt nothing like the Superman books that were going on at the time.
Absolutely. And it's telling that this book and probably Lois and Clark have been two of the best received Superman stories of the New 52, and it's truly stunning to me, Greg, that a well-received married couple from the 90s would be well received in today's day and age after we were told that it was irrelevant and didn't matter. Not saying there are any other characters in comics that could apply to, but
No.
what if there were? Like, let's just
And it's not like there was a dearth of married couples in the New 52 line, was there?
not that I'm aware of, but that's another topic for another
Single and looking.
No. Everyone
Girls,
is single and
the
looking.
winner is fine.
But yeah, I agree. Unchained was great. I enjoyed it as well. Just missed my list, honestly, just because I think you're just higher on Superman in general than I am, even though I've come around on the character considerably in recent years. There were times in my comic fandom where I kind of just wanted to see Superman get the shit kicked out of him by Batman every time he appeared. But I've grown out of that. I've gotten better. I've
We all mature or mature as some call it over the years, and our tastes and characters change and alter and whatnot. So I understand where you're coming from, and it's a character that means a lot to a lot of people for a lot of different reasons, and there's room for different interpretations. But I thought Snyder and Jim Lee took a good approach in kind of melding a lot of those different eras and visions of Superman into one that pretty much anyone could relate to.
And plus, you have to remember it when the book was announced, like just how huge that announcement of that creative team was, because Snyder was and still is. I mean, there is no bigger rock star right now in the DC universe than Scott Snyder, and Jim Lee. I mean, he's freaking Jim Lee. I mean, that's the best way we can put it. So you were going to sell thousands upon thousands of copies based on the creative team alone, and then of course they both brought their A game to the title. So.
Absolutely, and to show you how good the creative team was, anybody that's read our columns knows how high we are on Jeff Johns. He's my favorite writer ever in comics. But I will say this, I actually thought Jim Lee complimented Scott Snyder better than he complimented Jeff Johns on Justice League.
Ooh. That's tough to say because I felt like Jim Lee's brief run on Justice League, the story was so focused with setting everything up that it didn't have time to kind of do some more of the inventive things that that Snyder gave a shot, So I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I can go back and forth on it, but I can certainly see where you're coming from.
Yeah, I mean both are good, but I mean Jim Lee, to me you can't miss with Jim Lee art. But I thought this was his best work since, oddly enough, his last run on Superman back in the mid 2000s on a story called For Tomorrow with Brian Azzarello. I thought this was his best work since then.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that being said, let's move on to my number 5 selection. I mentioned this writer a little bit ago when I mentioned his Aquaman run, but I'm going to go with Cullen Bunn and his Sinestro run.
A book that I have not read, actually. I haven't read a single issue.
Which is surprising to me because I think both of us, after the Jeff Johns Green Lantern, that epic run, was there any character in comics whose stock had risen more in our eyes than Thal Sinestro in those 10 years? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. I mean, we opined very vociferously about how incredible the Johns transformation of Sinestro was, from one-dimensional villain to three-dimensional character that you're not really sure if he's a hero or a villain.
Yeah, I mean, phenomenal character reclamation work for Johns with Sinestro, and then, after his run was over, they gave Sinestro a solo title. And I think we all wish we could have seen a Sinestro solo book written by Jeff Johns. But in a way, the beginning of the New 52 kind of was that. Yeah, you had Hal Jordan there, but the first 7 or 8 issues of the New 52 Green Lantern almost read like a Sinestro
solo book,
title, written by Jeff Johns. But this one gives you a Sinestro you're more familiar with. Sinestro with the yellow ring, Sinestro back in charge of the Sinestro Corps, and kind of reevaluating the Sinestro Corps' role in the universe after the events of Wrath of the First Lantern, and kind of wanting to take, once again, a more proactive role in being a force for change in the universe, looking to assert some of the Green Lantern's role in policing the universe. And along with that, we also discover, in a slight spoiler here, because this has been revealed in solicits throughout the run, it's revealed that Sinestro is actually using the Sinestro Corps for his own personal gain to help bring together the survivors of Korrigar and create a new Korrigar out of that colony of survivors. And so you kind of follow Sinestro on his goal, on his journey of not just reclaiming the Corps, but also reclaiming his people and reclaiming his role as a hero in the eyes of his people, which he once was before his, fall from grace. And along with that, they also made the brilliant move of moving over from the Green Lantern Corps series, Soren Ignatu, Sinestro's daughter, moving her over, having her join the Sinestro Corps, and slowly, over the course of what I believe is 21 or 22 issues now, having her come to realize the sacrifices her father had made over time, and kind of not leading her to love the guy or anything like that, but to begrudgingly accept him for who he is and realize that there is some merit to his ways.
And she's always been a favorite character of mine. She was introduced shortly after Green Lantern Rebirth in the pages of Green Lantern Corps, I believe, by Jeff Johns and Dave Gibbons. And she turned into Kyle Rayner's love interest, but she evolved so much from that point, and then was subsequently pretty much done away with in the New 52 until this Sinestro book. That's been such a huge boon for her because she was such a minor part of the New 52 until this run. And it's good because she was instantly one of the best, most interesting female Green Lantern Corps members that there's ever been, and had a lot of depth to her character. And I was happy to see Cullen Bunn kind of bring her back to the forefront.
Yeah, I mean, Bunn has done a great job. I mean, he also wrote the Magneto solo series over at Marvel, so he has kind of that anti-hero or villain turned anti-hero, formula down pat. He worked with several artists on the run. Dale Eaglesham, who kicked off the run with him, was probably the best in terms of just giving you a great visual of the thousands of members of the Sinestro Corps. And, it's always, drawing Lantern books in general should really be a playground, a sandbox for any artist, because you get to do some of the most inventive things you can. And he did a great job during his time on the book. So, high praise for Sinestro. Does the character justice. After Jeff Johns left, I think there was a lot of concern about the Green Lantern titles in general, the Lantern family of books, if you will, and what hands they were going to be left in. And let's be honest, probably more misses than hits from the line as a whole, but this one was a big hit for me personally.
I'm glad to hear it. I've always wanted to read it. As you know, it was hard for me to keep up last year because of having a newspaper reporter's salary. But it's definitely one that I want to read in trade now that it's nearing its end, I guess, as of Rebirth.
I think 1 or 2 issues left. Yeah, I mean, not much left going.
It's but it's nice. It's nice to see that a solo spin-off Lantern book can do well, because I was a big fan of the Larfleeze book that was around, and it didn't last very long, obviously. And Sinestro is a much more well-rounded character, obviously, but I think Cullen Bunn deserves a lot of credit for being able to, and he's a guy that's dealt with a lot of blowback in the last couple of years, because he's written a critically derided Lobo book, and he's also dealt with blowback from Aquaman fans. But I think that the guy
also
deserves a
Green
lot
Lantern
of credit.
fans, because he wrote Lost Army, that Green
Lost
Lantern
Army, which was not well received,
the miniseries that kind of started when the main core title ended. So,
but he deserves credit for Sinestro, the longevity of the Sinestro book. First of all, the fact that it's remained by Green Lantern standards, a pretty good selling title, and that he's managed to keep it creatively relevant. Always a challenge with these. It's something that the first iteration of Red Lantern struggled with before Charles Soule came aboard. So definitely, I'm looking forward to it, and glad to hear you enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on. What you got at number 4?
At number 4, I have kind of an outside the box choice here. I have All-Star Western by Jimmy Palmiotti, Justin Gray, and the artist Maura Todd.
It's crazy. That book has been gone for so long that I almost forget it was part of the New 52 to begin with.
It was, and it actually had a pretty good run. I believe it went 34 issues. And this, first of all, a little bit of a disclaimer about this. I am admittedly a little bit biased towards the concept of All-Star Western. I grew up watching Westerns with my dad, and it's a genre that I love, and it's a genre that is completely underserved.
It's a what now?
A genre. Genre, if you will. Jim Ross's favorite word, genre. Well, not his favorite, but among his favorite words. And it's one that's underserved by Hollywood, and it's one that's very underserved by comics, because there's almost none on the stands. There are a few here and there, especially in the big two. It's almost, especially before All-Star Western, in the big two, it was very underserved. And
I think Marvel has a Red Wolf book right now, and I think other than that, that's it as far as I know from the big two.
And DC had Jonah Hex for years by Palmiotti and Gray. And so this was almost not a continuation of that, but the same team doing the same character. Jonah Hex is the main character in this book, but it's so fun, and I hate to use the word fun, but it's entertaining. It's a throwback Western style book, but it also has elements of superheroics, supernatural stories, detective stories. We're not dealing with the traditional. A lot of Westerns deal with the revenge motif, and there's a little bit of that in there too. But this has got detective work. This has got supernatural work. Through Jonah Hex, and also through these wonderful little backup stories that introduce all these other Wild West characters in the DC pantheon, from Batlash to just a litany of characters across the board. It really did a great job of reintroducing these characters for new audiences. Some of these characters I had never encountered. The Barbary Ghost, for instance.
Yeah, that was the one I was thinking of, because I read that one.
I thought that was excellent. And they maintained a visual style throughout the books that really made it feel gritty and feel westerny, for lack of a better term. The saloons look dirty, the streets look, clogged and cluttered, and buildings reach to the sky. And here's the cool part: it's 1880s Gotham that you're dealing with, so it has a tie to present day stuff. You see a little bit of the Court of Owls in there. You see some Cobblepot family in there. You see some Waynes and some Kanes, some Arkhams, and one of the lead characters in it is an Arkham, and he is Jonah Hex's partner, basically very reluctant partner on these cases, and it also turns into one of the most unlikely funny comics on the stands, because in the midst of all this cool action and cool kind of tough guy machismo stuff from Jonah Hex, it also has the great comedy of Arkham, who is this city slicker, nerdy, shy, intellectual dork who's trying to overanalyze everything, and then you have Jonah Hex, who just comes in and punches people and grunts and cusses and fornicates and all this other stuff. It's a great book, a great story. To me, it maintained a consistency throughout its run that very few books in recent years have been able to match. And I can't recommend it highly enough, especially if you're a fan of Westerns in general. You'll love this book. But even if you're not, if you're just a general comics fan, I think you'll really dig this book, because I know I did, and we actually reviewed, I believe, the first volume of it for a Longbook Hunters edition a couple years ago, and yeah, so it's one of my favorite books, and I hate that it got canceled when it did, but I'm glad that we got 34 issues worth, or at least over 30
really
issues.
Run 34.
It came pretty close to that. I'm not 100% sure that it hit that 34 mark, but it was pretty close to that. Now, the sales were never great. It stayed at they weren't the worst sales in the company, but they weren't great sales. So I'm happy that DC let it run as long as they did, and because there's a lot of books they give up on a little bit too early. I think this, I don't think, was one of those.
The majority of the DCU initiative, probably.
Yes, I would agree with that. But yes, All-Star Western hit 34 issues, so they deserve credit for that. And of course, I would still be reading it if it was on the stands. But go out and buy this, because it's a hell of a story, and also you're gonna laugh during it, which everybody criticizes unfairly, in my opinion. The new and somewhat fairly, I'll say, for the launch titles, the New 52 was criticized for not having any humorous titles in the lineup, but
which is a bullshit complaint, because that's not true. It's not true at all. Like, whatever. We'll not. I'll not take a dive down that path.
Yeah, but yeah, All-Star Western was one of the funnier books on the stand, and has plenty of comedy throughout, mixed in with all the seriousness and the ties to Batman, especially if you read this alongside Scott Snyder's first Batman arc. It's really cool, because it really plays off of a lot of what Snyder was doing at the time in Batman.
It was going on at the same time as the Court of Owls, so you were kind of getting the court working in multiple time periods. You were reading it as an extension of the Gotham line,
Exactly.
Yeah, I also loved it, and I was surprised, because I'm not nearly as big a Western fan as you are. But yeah, great book. Couldn't agree more. So, with that said, let's jump into my number 4, which I actually just mentioned a moment ago, because when we said that, hey, the first few issues of that Jeff Johns Green Lantern New 52 kind of felt like a Sinestro solo title. Hey, I really enjoy it when Jeff Johns writes Green Lantern. So I'm going to have the final 20 issues of Jeff Johns' legendary Green Lantern run that took place in the New 52. Green Lantern was one of two families, Batman being the other, although I would say this probably doesn't apply quite as much to Batman, that when the New 52 started, DC largely left their continuities intact. Would you more or less agree with that statement?
Yeah, I would agree. I think Green Lantern and Batman were the two big ones. In fact, they may be the only ones, but they had, so far as I could tell, not all of their histories, but the
big moments.
The big moments in their history remained mostly the same.
Yeah, mostly, for the most part. But anyway, when this run opens, it's actually, Hal has in a story that's been done before, so I can't say it's overly original. Hal no longer has his ring. He's been deposed by the Guardians of the Universe, and Sinestro has actually been reinstated into the Green Lantern Corps. And so you kind of have the story of Sinestro rediscovering his place in the Corps while Hal relearns how to live on Earth. I think the first issue of the book has he and Carol Ferris on one of their first genuine dates, and what I think they make reference to as being, a couple of years or something like that. So, and then of course by the end of the first issue, that's all undone as Sinestro comes and recruits Hal for a mission. But as you go along, you have that wonderful story at the beginning. You have the Third Army storyline, which you can take or you can leave. I enjoyed it because it's Jeff Johns doing Green Lantern, so even when it's bad, it's still good. But I have to be honest, largely I put this on my list for one issue, and that Green Lantern 20, Jeff Johns' last issue on the character, that 80-page special, is one of the most emotional gut punches of a book I've ever read. Not because it's torturing the reader emotionally or doing terrible things to the characters you know and love, but because you're seeing all these characters get resolution and get what feels like a logical endpoint. Specifically, that 6 to 8 page epilogue where he gives you his version of the final moments of each of these characters, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. Can't recommend it highly enough. Even if you don't read the rest of the run, go read Green Lantern 20. It's one of my favorite single issues of all time.
It's the Danny Hodge of single issues.
It is.
Quite frankly.
It can crush apples. It can break pliers. It can do anything a spider can.
Well, then again, that's your opinion. I mean, for God's sake, can a man have an opinion? I mean, then again, maybe I don't have an opinion. I don't know. No, I'm reserving a comment right now because this may or may not appear on my list a little bit later on. But I will say this: Green Lantern number 20 is one of my favorite single issues of a comic ever, because if you want it for future advice to, not that I'm one to give advice to comic creators because I've never created a comic, but if I were as a fan to give advice to a creative team when you're wrapping up a book, read Green Lantern 20, because that's how you do it. If you have a long run, that's how you wrap up a run, because some might say that it's unfair to future teams to do that coda. I don't care. It's Jeff Johns' Green Lantern has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end, and it's a beautiful ending. So yeah, totally agree, Nick, and I'll comment more on this in just a minute. But actually, right now we're going to take a break. We're going to let you listen to some of the other awesome podcasts on the Place to Be Network, and while you're doing that, we're gonna chill for a minute. When we come back, we'll have our top 3 and get down to the best of the new 52. See, folks, it wasn't all bad. We'll be back in just a minute.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
What's up, everybody? This is Kevin Kelly. Make sure you check out every episode of The Kevin Kelly Show right here on the Place to Be Nation. PlaceToBeNation.com. The Kevin Kelly Show. Every episode is a winner. At least we hope.
Place to Be Nation's Justin Rosero here. In addition to The Kevin Kelly Show, we have a ton of great podcasts available to you on iTunes and PlaceToBeNation.com. You can check out Scott Criscullo and me on the Mothership, the Place to Be podcast, with our famous Vintage Vault pay-per-view reviews. PTBN also covers current day wrestling with Main Event, Mission Indie Possible, and our monthly pay-per-view reaction shows with immediate feedback on WWE, NXT, and Ring of Honor Super Shows. And relive wrestling's past with our monthly pay-per-view rewind series, led by Ben Morse, and the Dangerous Alliance Wrestling podcast, as we dive into various subjects in the form of exercises and games. We got sports covered too with the Sports Evolution Mega Show with Scott, Dr. G, Cowboy, and Cowboy Sr., the Kings of Sport led by Live Audio Wrestling's Godfather Nate Milton, as well as the NBA Team Podcast and the TJ McClune Show. PTBN tackles pop culture and irreverence with Richard and the Mailman, the Glenn Butler Podcast Hour Spectacular, and if you like a hybrid of all of this in list form, check out Jordan Duncan's Rank and File. All of these shows are available on PlaceToBeNation.com, where we cover pro wrestling, sports, movies, comics, plus tournaments and more. We want to thank our friends at Bonehead's Wing Bar in West Warwick, Rhode Island and Fall River, Massachusetts, and Scott Doc Keats' Blog of Doom. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr as well. PlaceToBeNation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
This is Parv, and I'm here to tell you to listen and subscribe to the Pro Wrestling Only Place to Be Nation podcast network. That's the PWO PTBN podcast network, where you'll find a ton of in-depth shows done by hardcore fans. We've got Chris Zellner's 1-2 punch of Exile on Bad Street, and with David Bixenspan, a smash hit Between the Sheets. We've got Wrestling Culture with Dylan Hales and Dave Musgrave, Goodwill Wrestling and the reaction shows with Good Old Will from Texas. We got This Week in Wrestling with my man Pete and Johnny Sorrow, Stephen Graham and Tim Livingston's Pro Wrestling Super Show, Tag Teams Back Again with Kelly and Marty Sleaze, and a ton of other great shows too. And of course there's Titans of Wrestling and Where the Big Boys Play with yours truly and some dude from down south called Chad. PWO PTBN Podcast Network.
Welcome everyone back to the Hard-Traveling Fanboys. I'm Greg Phillips. With me as always is Nick Duke, and we're here to bring you the top 3 best New 52 runs according to the two of us knuckleheads. When last we left you, Nick was talking to you about the wonderful Jeff Johns run on Green Lantern, particularly his final 20 issues. And I am here to talk to its greatness again, because I have Jeff Johns and Doug Mankey's Green Lantern run at number 3 on my list of the best New 52 runs. It's hard to say much else after what Nick just bloviated about a moment ago, very, very eloquently. I will add to it that I think it was consistently great. I've read people online who at the time were, iffy on it at different points. The Third Army kind of wasn't as great a villain concept as I thought it was going to be. But I got to be honest, I loved every issue. I thought it was fantastic from beginning to end. The first 6 or 7 issues with Sinestro as the sole Green Lantern, and Hal Jordan kind of being forced to go along with him on a buddy cop adventure. I say buddy cop, but it's more of wacky tag team partners who hate each other.
Or do they?
Or do they?
Because,
yes.
Go ahead.
Well, no, you go ahead.
Well, I just mentioned Green Lantern 20 before the break, but I have to throw another shout out for, and I'll probably butcher the actual line, but it's one of my favorite lines I've ever read in a comic book, when Hal and Sinestro are having their final face-to-face, and Hal says something to the effect of, "Were we ever friends?" And Sinestro says, "That's the tragedy of all this, Jordan. Hal will always be friends." And that was just a phenomenal emotional moment. The first time I think Sinestro had actually referred to him by his first name. What in the hell was that? Just a fantastic line. So
absolutely, and it works even if you read it in Harry Carey's voice. That's the tragedy of it, Jordan. Hal, we were always friends. We'll always be friends.
I wonder what old Jim Barnett would say about that line.
My boy, we'll always be friends.
And maybe more than that.
Maybe so. But yeah, no, it was a great line. But those first 6-7 issues with Sinestro as the lead and Hal as his accomplice were phenomenal. Then we get introduced at some point along those lines to the character of Simon Baz, who I love. I thought it was a brave move on Johns and DC's part to introduce a Muslim character who's not a stereotype, who's a normal guy, like the kind that I grew up with in high school. And I thought it was a really important character that unfortunately they haven't done a lot with since then. That'll change soon. But Simon was a great character, and it was a great introduction. They reintroduced Black Hand as only Johns can write Black Hand like this. Wonderfully done. It's a terrific comic book story with, again, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I feel like every long-term, if there's no editorial interference and if there are no outside factors, a creative team should come in with a plan and have a beginning, a middle, and an end to their story.
And a lot of people disagree with that because a lot of people say the nature of the superhero story is that it should never have an end. And I don't agree. I think you can do a version of an ending and still leave the door cracked, for other teams to follow, because John's coda was set years in the future, decades for other creative teams to tell other stories with these same characters. I don't think it took away in any way from, the Lantern concept or the freedom of creators that followed. I don't buy that one at all.
Absolutely. And there's different ways to end a run. Not every run has to end literally in the way that this did. You can have thematic endings, but it's important to have an ending, I think. If you have an opportunity, some runs are cut short and don't have that opportunity, but I think in general, having that separates the great runs from the good runs. And certainly John's Green Lantern had an amazing ending. And I just can't say enough about the partnership with Doug Mahnke, who Mahnke's art is hit or miss for me. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. On Green Lantern, he was a great fit.
Yep.
He was following in the footsteps of two legends in Ethan Van Sciver and Ivan Rice, and he did a wonderful job filling in. And I really thought that he shined best in the action sequences, in getting shots of the multiple Corps members, which, as you said, has got to be like playing in a sandbox for any comic book artist. So, yeah, really good story and great art from Doug Mahnke.
I agree. With that said, let's jump into my number 3. And this is one that some people who know us might think it's a little surprising. Not that it's on the list, but that it's not higher on the list. I'm going to put Jeff Johns' Justice League right here at number 3. And I say Jeff Johns, he worked with a variety of artists. We mentioned Jim Lee earlier. We mentioned
Ivan Rice. Jason Fabik.
Jason Fabik being the last one. That was the name that was escaping me. But phenomenal artist throughout, no doubt. But Johns was the constant force on this book. Johns has been on Justice League from the moment the New 52 started. It's the longest run in the New 52. That it even, the only book that outpaces it is Batman, and that's only by a single issue, I believe, because Snyder and Capullo are leaving before issue 52. But anyway, it was one of the mainstays, and it got to tell the updated origin of the League. Got to introduce Cyborg as a founding member, which is an entirely new DC, New 52 concept. Had not been done before, moving him out of the ranks of the Teen Titans and up into the A-list, so to speak. A concerted effort to get a little bit more diversity on the League. Johns also got to tell some outstanding backups with the new version of Shazam or Captain Marvel, if you're holding on to that nomenclature. And of course, I can't say enough good things about the current storyline he's doing, Darkseid War, which may wind up being, I don't know, that's going to be tough. If we were doing top New 52 stories, even without reading the ending, I would probably have had Darkseid War on the list. It's that good.
It's been great.
It's been a phenomenal read from start to finish. And, so Jeff Johns' Justice League has been, everything you want a Justice League title to be. Iconic art with these iconic characters, and even varying the League a little bit, bringing in Captain Cold as a recurring character, bringing in Lex Luthor as a recurring character, bringing in the soon-to-be Green Lantern Jessica Cruz as a recurring character. So
we even saw characters like Element Woman, of all things. We saw a new version of the Atom. We saw the Crime Syndicate. We saw a lot of new faces shifting in and out of the League during the course of his tenure, yes. But all of them seemed to work. All of the iterations of the team really worked.
You got the best of both worlds, but you got the iconic six, the core six, if you will, of Flash, Green Lantern, Aquaman, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. But you also got to see Jeff Johns basically being able to play with any element in the DC universe he wanted to, and that was really cool because for the most part, he's been on single character books for his tenure, and so to get to see him play with literally whatever elements he wanted was just a really, really cool thing.
Yeah, I agree. And believe it or not, this book didn't actually make my top 5 list.
Wow.
I
Really?
know, very shocking. And the only reason I can come up with is because I've loved it. It's just on the outside, just a bit outside, because I love it. It's been great. But I felt like when compared to these other 5 books that are on my list, for me the consistency wasn't as strong as some of these other ones in terms of it's been great, but there were a few valleys here and there. The first arc was pretty good. Second arc was good. Third arc was great. Fourth arc was okay. But for instance, the Amazo virus story was not the strongest. But it's still outstanding from beginning to end for the most part. All of the Forever Evil stuff was great. The Trinity War has almost been forgotten at this point, but it was a fantastic crossover between Justice League America, and Justice League Dark. And arguably peaking right now with Darkseid War.
I wouldn't even say that's arguably. I think that's
it's been
the clear high water mark of this run.
Yeah, it's been a great run, and through a variety of artists and through a variety of direction shifts from the company, and it's been wonderful. Just outside my list, but I have no issue with you having it ranked highly, because honestly, I could have shuffled the order of my list and had no problem with it. So, outstanding run.
Yeah.
And that brings me to my number 2, also involving, stop me if you've heard this before, Jeff Johns. At number 2, I have the Jeff Johns Ivan Rice Aquaman. Yes, that's right, folks. Aquaman. If you've never read an Aquaman comic, if you've laughed at Aquaman jokes, if you find it laughable that Aquaman could be considered a serious, badass character, I challenge you, I dare you to buy the trade of the first arc of Jeff Johns and Ivan Rice's Aquaman run, or even just the first issue.
I was about to say that.
Take one issue.
The first 6 pages of the first issue, even.
The first 6 pages of the first issue will hook you on Aquaman, will distill the concept down, and make you realize you've been wrong your entire life about Aquaman. That Aquaman is a cool character. That Aquaman is a badass. That Aquaman can be used in a context that isn't corny and campy, but doesn't take itself too seriously either. And that Jeff Johns is the best freaking writer in comics, and how can I tell you these things? Because it all happened to me. As hardcore of a DC fan as I am, I was never an Aquaman fan. I couldn't get into him. I thought he was a laughable character. And granted, I didn't read some of the classic runs on Aquaman, but when I would pick up an Aquaman comic, or when I pick up a Justice League comic and he would appear, I never got it. I never understood. Well, this guy's lame, why would anybody be interested in Aquaman? Well, now I know. And I know because Jeff Johns took all of the previous Aquaman history and distilled it down into a form that makes Aquaman instantly one of my favorite superheroes. By the end of reading that first issue, I added it to my pull list, and I never looked back, because John's Aquaman is a character that I can relate to, that you can relate to. As a listener, you can relate to it. Anybody out there can relate to this character. And the villains are great. The art is fantastic. Ivan Rice might even be better on Aquaman than he was on Green Lantern, which is almost blasphemous to say. And it was just a consistently awesome ride for the entirety of John's tenure on the book. And thankfully, it looks like he's going to get a chance to tell, I guess, another Aquaman story pretty soon, with the help of Dan Abnett, who we mentioned earlier. But yeah, this Aquaman run, to me, whether it was the Trench, whether it was not the Outsiders, but the group that Aquaman was part of before, or was it the Outsiders? What was their name?
It was not the Outsiders, and I'm blanking on.
I'm blanking on it too. But that story arc, the Throne of Atlantis, the crossover with Justice League, which might be the all-time best Aquaman story that I've read. Yeah, it's been such a good run that it subsequently made me go back and read prior Aquaman comics from the past, which I never would have done before. So I can't say enough about this run. Go pick it up, and I promise you, at the very least, you'll laugh because Jeff Johns does not hide from the Aquaman jokes. He confronts them
in the first 6 pages of the first issue.
Yep. He confronts
the
them.
Others was the name of it.
That's right, the Others. He confronts them in the first issue, the first 6 pages, gets the jokes out of the way, and says, "Okay, yes, this is funny." He laughs at himself, and now we're going to show you why he's a badass.
And you never look back. Like it's almost like the end of 8 Mile, to make a weird reference, where in his closing rap battle, Eminem's character takes the ammunition out of his opponent's gun, so to speak, by systematically picking himself apart so that his opponent has nothing left to throw at him. By doing that with those Aquaman jokes, you have no... You never think about them. He takes them, he puts them there, and you never revisit them in your mind ever again.
Yep.
And
They lose all their power.
They lose every bit of power that they had. I could say so much about this, and I will in a few moments.
Ooh, the intrigue builds. Well, let's hear your number 2, Nick.
So at number 2, and I have a sneaking suspicion what's about to happen with your list as well. At number 2, I'm going to go with a character that I've had a big affinity for a long time, but who even I can admit probably hasn't had too many great runs in his history. He's got one that everybody remembers, that being the Mike Grell run. But and I'm a big fan of the Kevin Smith run. But other than that, the character of Green Arrow hasn't had a ton of what I would call iconic runs in his history. But he's got one now in the New 52 with Jeff Lemire. And I'm gonna say Jeff Lemire first because Greg and I both are similar in the regard that I think, generally speaking, we tend to be more quote-unquote writer guys than we are artist guys, in that because we both fancy ourselves writers of, varying sorts at times, we have a little bit, more appreciation for the writing. And it really takes a unique and ultra-talented artist to really grab us and make us big fans. And those superlatives do not apply to anyone in comics if they do not apply to Andrea Sorrentino, whose art on Green Arrow legitimately is probably my favorite comic art of the last 5 to 10 years. It is amazing in every sense of the word. It's simultaneously surrealistic, photorealistic, unique. I mean, it is... I can't say enough good things about it. Primarily, one thing that sounds small when I say it out loud, but if you go and read the issue, you'll see what I mean. His use of the space in between panels is some of the most inventive stuff I've seen in comics ever. In that you're used to seeing everything important play out in a box, in a panel. But because Green Arrow as a character, as an archer, is so built around forward motion, whether it be of his arrows or his fists or whatever he's doing, he uses that space in between the panels to convey motion and forward motion in a way I have not seen ever. It is phenomenal art. The best art in comics from the last 5 years, in my opinion, bar none. And I was so sad when that book ended. It's everything a Green Arrow book should be. It's got fantastic martial arts elements. It's got fantastic, almost like a James Bond kind of approach at times. It's got some supernatural elements. It's really just a grab bag of all the things that make comics great and all the things that make Green Arrow great, while it's a Green Arrow story without being a Green Arrow story. And what I mean by that is it manages to be a great Green Arrow story without falling back on the traditional, I'm a dyed in the wool liberal and making jokes about politics the entire time. That other Green Arrow runs have done.
Green Arrow is such a malleable character, one of the most malleable in comics, and that he's so many different things. in so many different eras. But you're right. This does not fall back on any of the crutches of the past. It uses those elements to inform it, but it doesn't rely on the greatness of Mike Grell or the greatness of Kevin Smith or the greatness of Denny O'Neil. It rather creates a very distinct, unified vision of who Oliver Queen is, who his rogues gallery are, and who his allies are.
And speaking of allies, it's not often with a character that's been around as long as Green Arrow that you get to add a spoke to the wheel, so to speak. But Jeff Lemire adds a hell of a spoke to the wheel in the invention of Oliver's half-sister, Amiko, who winds up being, if you read our comics draft, you would know I'm a big Amiko Queen fan because I had her in every book I could. That's a phenomenal character that needs to be in a Teen Titans book once Rebirth has occurred. I mean, she's just a phenomenal character, especially in an era where we're looking for diversity. We're looking to reach out to new readership. A half Asian female strong teenage lead is just a no-brainer for a book like Teen Titans.
It's also the very rare case in a character that's been around as long as Green Arrow that a new character actually adds to the existing character. Yes. And this is a bit of a cheat in terms of this is a younger Oliver Queen than the one that we saw pre New 52 where he had his son Connor, but introducing a responsibility like Amiko, who's so young, into the life of Green Arrow, who's an active superhero, adds a layer to his character and really enhances it in a way that I don't even know if the addition of Damian Wayne enhanced Bruce Wayne to the degree that Amiko fundamentally changed the character of Oliver Queen. So I'm with you on her. She's a great character. And really, Lemire and Sorrentino introduced so many reimagined concepts from the outsiders, and in this case, it actually is the outsiders.
Yes.
From the outsiders to a totally different take on Richard Dragon,
yes.
who's an old kung fu character in DC, Denny O'Neil guy, to a new take on Vertigo that I thought was great.
And especially Sorrentino's art. Because that depiction of Vertigo's powers, he depicts it as a never-ending spiral that is causing this sense of vertigo. And as you see the spiral come out, he will do splash pages where you are seeing things happen inside his drawing of the spiral, which I'm probably not doing a very good job of giving you the mental image of what it is, but it's an amazing visual when you see it for the first time. That dude just like I've never seen anybody draw a comic book the way Sorrentino drew that Green Arrow. Ever.
No, it was almost like the perfect meld, of right place, right time, right artist, right character. And he's a great artist regardless, whatever he's drawing. But something about that Green Arrow fit for him just worked. The way that Francis Manapul worked on The Flash, the way that Jim Lee worked on Batman. There are just some artists that they work for that character. And man, that Green Arrow and the way that he used the white space was perhaps inspired by Mike Grell, because Grell did some of that back in the Longbow Hunters days, but it's different. He does it, Sorrentino does it almost, would you say, in a cinematic way?
Yes, that's a great way to put it. And, Grell would do it, and largely when he did it, when you use the term white space with Grell, it was almost always exactly that, white space on a page. With Sorrentino, he would do it with colored backgrounds, and do it inside onomatopoeia of various different kinds. I remember something like thwip or crack or something like that would be drawn really big, and he would have the image inside the letters. I mean, just stuff like that you do not expect when you open a comic, because when you've been reading them for as long as we have, at a certain point, when you open a comic book, you kind of expect it to have a certain look and a certain feel. And yeah, you always want some unique things within those confines, but like I said, that Sorrentino's approach to that book was unlike anything I've seen in a quote-unquote big two book ever, honestly.
Very often, I'll pick up a comic book and I'll be floored with how good it is. I'll be like, man, that was a really good comic. Very rarely do I pick up a comic and feel like I just got kicked in the nuts with how my mind just got blown. And that's how it felt, when I opened it. It was a shock to the system, because the first time they started, by the way, folks, we need to make this clear. If you're buying a New 52 Green Arrow trade, make sure that it's the Jeff Lemire, Andrea Sorrentino, because the ones before those, the 2 or 3 volumes of Green Arrow before they took over, are not good. But when they came in, that first issue, I remember I picked it up on a whim because I was so disgusted with the New 52 Green Arrow at that point. And the first time I looked at it, it was like nothing I had seen before. And that's very rare in comics, in superhero comics especially. Superhero comics are the tendency is to fall back on the tried and true, what's been done before. And this was like nothing I had seen, and it shook my system up. It was different, and different in a good way. The way that Matt Fraction's Hawkeye was in Marvel, different, stands out from the pack. The Esad Ribic and Jason Aaron's Thor, different, stands out from the pack. That's what this run was for me, and that's why it's my number one. I'll go ahead and say it. My number one book from the New 52 is the Jeff Lemire, Andrea Sorrentino run on Green Arrow. It didn't last terribly long. I believe, it started at 17, ended around
34.
What are they? 34, 35,
so,
something like that.
And then it also had a Batman's not a 0 years. Excuse me. It had a Futures End tie-in and what was the other one? A Secret Origin story in the anthology book Secret Origins.
Yes,
so
and
got about 19 issues worth of content in total.
And I believe it actually did have a 0 year tie-in as well.
It did, but that happened in the 17 to 34 that we.
Yeah. So it didn't last as long as something certainly like the Snyder Capullo Batman or like the John's Justice League, but like John's Aquaman, it lasted long enough to leave an impression on this version of the character, which we may never see this version of Oliver Queen again. We don't know what's going to happen with Rebirth and the changes that the character is going to undergo. But what they did was leave an imprint that, in my mind, and certainly in your mind as well, Nick, is going to last the test of time and stand up with Mike Grell and stand up with Kevin Smith and stand up with Denny O'Neil as these iconic, different versions of Green Arrow that work. And this one not just worked, but in my opinion worked to a higher level than any other New 52 book other than the Snyder and Capullo Batman. And at times, there were times that this was my favorite book on the stands. What they did with reintroducing old characters and freshening them up was Jeff Johns like, in terms of taking a Richard Dragon, who I always had a soft spot for, and reinventing him as a criminal overlord, and a take on a character that almost melded some of the concepts from the 70s kung fu movies that inspired the character, reintroducing these villains, the Vertigos of the world, the Clock King, William Todd. Reintroducing him in a totally different way that wasn't at all campy and wasn't beholden to any previous version and stood on its own. Inventive, creative superhero storytelling is rare, and it deserves to be praised when it's there. And that's why this book is my number one. And I think I know what your number one is, so let's go ahead and hear it.
Before I jump into that, like you were saying, if you go out in search of the Green Arrow run, it is volume 4 of the trade paperbacks, but my recommendation would be DC actually released the entire run, 17 issues of the main numbered series. That's issues 17 through 34, plus their excellent, easily the best of the Futures End one-shots that DC did, and then also the Secret Origins excerpt as well. So about 18 and a half, 19 full issues of content. There is a deluxe hardcover for $50, and those 19 issues for $50 is a phenomenal price that you can't beat. And I'm quoting the MSRP. You may be able to get a better
and with
price on
deluxe size artwork, no less.
Yes, and that artwork, oh man, it has to be seen to do it justice. You know, we can't explain to you just how excellent it really was. Oh my God! Wow, actually on Amazon right now, that hardcover is going for $31.24. That book for $31.24 should be an instant buy, even if you've never read a Green Arrow comic in your life. It's that good. The art alone is worth $31.24, and the story happens to be phenomenal as well. But as our countdowns out and are, we'll go a little bit anticlimactic here at the close, as Greg pretty much summed up the argument for me making my book number one, and I am going with, of course, Jeff Johns and Ivan Rice, Aquaman, largely for the same reasons that Greg outlined, especially this one. When you're able to take a character that even a longtime comic fan such as myself, a hardcore DC fan such as myself, considered a joke, a laughingstock, and somebody who wasn't worth my time, when you take him and in the course of 6 pages, honestly, 6 pages take him from off my radar to on my pull list, there is no greater praise for a book or a character or a creator than that. It is everything you never knew you wanted from an Aquaman story. I'll put it that way. It is absolutely phenomenal. And it would be one thing if it just did one issue and made you respect Aquaman and that was it. But it tells a phenomenal, almost Game of Thrones-esque story of political intrigue and
comparison.
And political intrigue in a high fantasy setting. It's just, I can't say enough great things about the book. The art is phenomenal. I think it's actually, and this is somewhat controversial, I think it's the greatest character reclamation job Jeff Johns has ever done. And that that covers a lot of ground.
It does.
Because he didn't just reclaim the character of Aquaman. He reclaimed the entire concept of Aquaman. The mythos, the rogues gallery, the supporting characters. A character like Mira, who I only knew of because of her scantily clad attire, has become one of my favorite characters in comics because of Jeff Johns. And
absolutely. Yeah, to the point where did you ever think you would honestly be advocating for Mira to get a solo title, as we have at various points in the last couple of years?
I gotta be honest, man. I don't know what Abnett's long-term plan for her is exactly, but the way his first issue reads, you certainly get the impression if they were ever going to do it, now feels like the timing is perfect.
And that owes to Jeff Johns.
It does.
He was starting to make her a focus right before the New 52 started in the Brightest Day story, but it hadn't really had a chance to take off yet. New 52, he doubled down and he made Mira an equal to Aquaman, where they're co-leads basically in the book.
To the point where I think that the number one reason that Cullen Bunn's Aquaman run got as much crap as it did was because of its treatment of Mira and relegating her to more of a side role than a co-lead role.
Agreed.
Because after Johns left, Jeff Parker kept Mira as essentially a co-lead, but when Cullen Bunn dared to tinker with that formula, the fan base reacted in a big, bad way and did not take kindly to it at all. I mean, and it was very telling that was one of the first things Dan Abnett reinstalled was Mira, almost, I would argue, judging by his first issue, as the point of view character for the reader. But we're not here to talk about Dan Abnett. I mean, we're talking about Jeff Johns, and that run, phenomenal. If Darkseid War wasn't the high point for Jeff Johns of the New 52, I would argue that Throne of Atlantis, the excellent crossover that bounced back and forth between Justice League and Aquaman, would be it. It was just, I say it's the best Aquaman story I've ever read, and that's probably not the highest form of praise because I haven't read that many. It's one of the best comic book stories I've ever read. It's excellent. I cannot wait to see the Rise of the Seven Seas follow up whenever that may come. Jeff Johns and Aquaman now is a pairing much like Jeff Johns in Green Lantern, much like Scott Snyder in Batman, much like Mike Grell in Green Arrow. It's one of those pairings that is going to go down in history for me as possibly, or not even possibly, undoubtedly, the definitive creator for that character. When I think Aquaman, from now probably until the end of time, I will think Jeff Johns, and that's a testament to just how great this New 52 run of his was.
Yeah, and speaking of Throne of Atlantis, it was such an effective Aquaman story. They turned it into an animated movie. It's probably going to serve as the basis, I would assume, for a large portion of the live-action Aquaman feature.
Can only hope.
It really turned a lot of heads at the time, and still to this day, if you pick it up and read it, I just recently read it for the first time, maybe about 6 months ago, and it really holds up to anything that I've read in the last few years. It's such a good superhero epic. It's heartbreaking at times.
Yeah, I mean,
it's action-packed.
It's a Jeff Johns staple now of taking villains that you considered to be one-note and cheesy and turning them into sympathetic, understandably motivated, three-dimensional characters. And much like he did with Sinestro, he does the same thing with both Black Manta and Ocean Master in this run, and especially Ocean Master in Throne of Atlantis. You almost wind up feeling like he is completely justified in every action he takes.
I agree.
Phenomenal work with that character.
Totally. Well, there you have it, folks. The New 52, top of the line in a nutshell. Just to recap, my list was at number 5, Scott Snyder and Jim Lee's Superman Unchained. At number 4, Justin Palmiotti, Justin Gray, and Moritat's All-Star Western. At number 3, Jeff Johns and Doug Mankey's Green Lantern. At number 2, Jeff Johns and Ivan Reis's Aquaman. And at number 1, Jeff Lemire and Andrea Sorrentino's Green Arrow. Nick, what was your list?
To recap, my list was at number 5, Cullen Bunn's Sinestro. Number 4, Johns and Mankey's Green Lantern. At number 3, Johns in a rotating panel of artists on Justice League. At number 2, the Jeff Lemire, Andrea Sorrentino Green Arrow. And then at number 1, the Jeff Johns, Ivan Reis Aquaman, the tour de force. But
the bull of the woods, if you will.
If you will. But you notice as we run down those lists, we both, and this is predictable to a certain degree, had a lot of Jeff Johns on our list. A lot of Jeff Johns. We made the determination before we started this list not to include Scott Snyder's Batman because we felt like it was a slam dunk surefire number 1. If it were included, there'd be no point even reading a number 1 because that would be it. The New 52 has caught a lot of flack from a lot of people, and I think some of it is deserved. Some of it isn't, but some of it is. So let me pose an alternate question to you, a little bonus topic. I'll throw you a little post-credit scene, if you will, here on the first Hard-Traveling Fanboys podcast. If we had made a rule that both Scott Snyder and Jeff Johns were ineligible for this list, would it even be possible to come up with a list of 5 New 52 titles that you felt good about promoting to people? That you felt like said good things about DC's publishing strategy as a whole, and by proxy, is it necessarily a good thing that 2 creators seem to be responsible for such a high portion of the high quality books that DC puts out?
You know, and it's a great question, and thinking about it, it depends on the standard, because if you're just saying, pretty good books, yeah, I could probably do that with 5. But if you're saying really good, top of the line, no, I could not name 5 New 52 books that I considered to be consistently good or great from beginning to end. Now, here's a caveat to that, to listeners out there. I haven't read all of the New 52 runs, even close.
Nor have I.
Not even close to that. I've read a lot, but I if you take Johns and Snyder out of the equation, first of all, you kill the sales charts because they're the only two writers for DC that consistently sell. And second of all, you kind of take out, for me anyway, the standout creative runs. I mean, there were books that almost made my list, like Charles Soule's Red Lanterns almost made my list. Well, that's the standout. That's the standout example. Van Jensen's Green Lantern Corps I liked a lot.
I know a lot of people were high on the Manipul
Flash, yeah, which I haven't read enough of. I'm familiar with his art on it from Jeff Johns writing it pre-New 52, but that's a run that I still haven't read, the Buccellato and Manipul run, but have heard good things about it. But no, I don't think I could do that because Snyder wrote Batman and Unchained and Swamp Thing. Johns wrote the ones that we listed, and also Justice League America, which I loved a lot and nearly made my list.
I almost forgot about Justice League America.
Yeah, because I think one of the problems with the New 52 is that it had an issue of a lot of turnover on titles. I think that there were some good creative teams that had a chance to have great runs that were cut short, that were shifted off of titles. And I think that there are also situations where DC lost creators due to editorial oversight. People that left the fold to go over to Marvel or to go independent.
Oh, God, J.H. Williams.
J.H. Williams.
Yeah, which was a pretty acclaimed run.
Yeah, he left because of that. Justin Jordan left the company. And Jeff Lemire just recently left the company. Andrea Sorrentino left the company. There was a lot of creators that left during the course of the New 52 for a variety of reasons. We don't know all the reasons. But over the course of that time, it became apparent that Johns and Snyder were the cash cows for DC, to the point that if you were listing DC's best, and Todd Weber made this point recently, if you're listing DC's best writers, it's Johns and Snyder, and who else? I mean, Jeff Lemire maybe, but he's gone now. And now the good news is with Rebirth, they're starting to rebuild their ranks. Tom King is there, and he's making waves. Van Jensen.
I'm big on Ben Percy.
Ben Percy's very good. But it's taken a while to get to this point, because for a while there you were seeing, I don't mean to throw creators under the bus here, but you were seeing writers that were not really considered to be particularly interesting or relevant. Guys like Scott Lobdell, guys like Tom DeFalco, Bob Harris in editorial, Dan DiDio writing comics, and doing a decent job, but still, you're seeing a lot of these titles that...
The Finches, how do they stay employed?
Yes. Well, David's a great artist, but, I don't know about writing. But you're seeing a lot of these creators that are, maybe their best work's behind them, and they were kind of having to pull the proverbial plow for DC for a while there. So yeah, I don't think it's a good thing necessarily that your staple of writers is two great creators and a bunch of, solid creators. I think Marvel arguably has a more balanced pool of writers to choose
pool of writers, yeah, no doubt. More proven pool of writers too.
Yeah, proven, yeah, because there's a lot of young talent in DC right now. But over the last few years, that hasn't been the case, and so
makes you especially worry a little bit, because right now Jeff Johns isn't on a Rebirth book, not an ongoing.
No, and Snyder's on what, one?
He's on All-Star Batman, which is one of the few monthly titles, not a twice monthly.
There's going to be a lot of sink or swim moments coming after.
But Greg Rucka's coming back, so all is well.
Greg Rucka's coming back. That helps a lot. Getting a guy like him, I'm pretty certain his Wonder Woman is going to.
It's the equivalent of when
the
WWE roster is depleted and Hulk Hogan comes back for a run. It's just, it reshapes everything in such a much better and positive way that
Positive. That's correct. That's correct. Positive, and especially when Hogan comes back, and hosts a successful show like Tough Enough. That's kind of what it's like. I feel like if you're distilling it down to nuts and bolts. But it's a good and a bad thing that you have two guys like John Snyder. It's good. It's great to have them. But it's bad because it sets the standards so high for everyone else.
Absolutely.
I feel bad because I feel like Robert Venditti, who has been on Green Lantern since Jeff Johns left, I feel like I don't think his run's been great. I think it's been okay. But
there was nothing he could have done.
Yeah.
You and I have talked about this in sports before, but I think it applies to comics as well. You don't want to be the guy that follows the guy. I mean, for example, you don't want to be the guy that follows Derek Jeter at shortstop for the Yankees. You don't want to be the guy that follows Chipper Jones at third base for the Braves. You don't want to be the guy
that follows Hulk Hogan in the WWF as champion.
Yes, you don't want to be the guy that follows, Michael Jordan as the star on the Bulls. I mean, it's just some people leave such indelible marks on the roles that they played that no one is going to be able to give anybody else the benefit of the doubt until there's a little bit of time that has separated those two. And that's certainly the case with Venditti. I'm not high on his Green Lantern run by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
But I also don't think it's been awful either. It's been a serviceable Green Lantern run that is made to look terrible based on the very huge boots that he's had to step into. So
absolutely, brother.
But like
it's hard to step into those boots.
But I'm like you. I mean, I kind of think, honestly, if I was making a top 5, like I don't have any problem telling anyone that I know, even if they're not big comic book readers, I don't have any problem recommending that they spend their hard-earned money even on any of the books on my top 5. Take Snyder and Johns both out of the equation entirely. I don't think I could put together a list of 5 books that I would make that same recommendation.
And I think, to your point, these 5 books I feel would reach, and maybe I'm naive on this, but I feel they would reach virtually any audience in comics that reads comics.
I agree, yeah.
And past that, it's more niche stuff. It's more, like, I loved Larfleeze. I would not recommend Larfleeze to everyone, not even most people. I loved Larfleeze, but am I going to go up to somebody that has never read a Green Lantern comic and say, here, read Larfleeze? No, not at all. So, same thing with Justice League 3000. Good book, but niche. Yeah, so I agree. I mean, that's an interesting point. But the good news is we've given you some good recommendations here, and we would love for you to hit us up on the Twitter, courtesy of I Am Jericho there.
I prefer the Twitter machine, courtesy.
Courtesy of Mr. Bully Ray. I am at G
or
Phillips.
Brother Ray, if you will.
Or Brother Ray. Good Lord. Lord, we need to do a hard-traveling TNA podcast.
Please no.
The at G Phillips, 2 L's in Phillips, 8652, and he is at Nick Duke, 87.
Yes.
And we urge you to get up with us and give us some feedback on this podcast. What did you like? What did you not like? Give us your lists. What are some new 52 runs that we left out? What are some new 52 runs that you loved? What are the ones you agreed on? What are the ones that you disagreed on? Hit us up, and if we disagree with you, we'll block you, just like comic book creators do. So.
And if you're not already doing so, there is, in addition to the main PlaceToBeNation.com Facebook page that you should be following, there is also a sub-site, a spin-off in true comic book fashion, if you will. There is a Place to Be Nation dedicated comics Facebook page that we kind of use for general discussion and to promote some of the things going on at the site and things like that. So follow that page. That's probably the easiest way to get a direct link to us, in addition to Twitter, of course. And, of course, you can also always use the outdated now form of email if you like. We are nickd@placetobenation.com and gregp@placetobenation.com.
And who doesn't love the Nick D, and who doesn't love to Greg P? That's a a truism across the board. But no, yeah, the Place to Be Nation Facebook page is a great way to go. We love to foster discussion there. We will be ramping up the discussion there in coming weeks. We're out of our shells. We've been hibernating for a while now, and we're back in the fold now. We're going to try to get things going again, get some discussion going on the page. And the good thing is, we try to focus as much as we can on the positive. We will have some fun here and there with the negative stuff, but it's a safe place to talk about your comic book preferences. I know it's a kind of a crazy world out there in the online comics community in terms of what's acceptable and not acceptable online to say, but we have a pretty understanding group of folks, and yeah, come on board and join the family, as they say. And by they, I mean we.
And as you said, we're going to be ramping up the discussion there in the coming weeks. And I think we're going to kind of try to use these podcasts as a launching point. And with that in mind, we just wanted to, before we sign off, give you a little taste of what's coming down the road. Starting with, in 3 weeks' time, our first Long Book Hunters podcast, where we're going to take a look in honor of the major motion picture coming to screens everywhere. Greg and I are going to revisit Marvel's Civil War. We're going to revisit that issue, the Mark Millar, Steve McNiven maxi series, mini series, however you want to term it. Should be interesting because at the time I remember you and I kind of had differing opinions on it. I was a lot higher on it than you were. So that'll be in 3 weeks' time. In 2 weeks' time, we'll be bringing you the rundown. We're going to take a look at the biggest news in comics and comic-related media, whether that be movies, TV, video games, what have you. We're going to, just kind of chop up a little bit of the news and notes from around the industry.
But in a shocking twist, it's going to be the news and notes from 1952 in the world of comics.
Yes. So. We're going to talk a lot about how the industry is dying. That'll be a good thing to talk about. And then in 1 week's time, and this is what I'm really, really looking forward to, our first edition of Off the Page. As we said, we're gonna experiment with a commentary format. And if you've been following the news at all, you know that recently the world lost a legend, a musical legend, the purple one, Prince, no longer with us. And what most of you know, but some of you younger people out there, if you're listening, may not know, Prince once did an entire original album for a comic book. Prince did the companion album to the 1989 Batman film. And in that vein, next week on Off the Page, we're going to be taking a special look at what someone considered to be the movie that really kicked off the comic book craze on the big screen, 1989's Batman.
Yeah, and that's going to be a great. First of all, it's a movie that's a big part of everyone in our generation's childhood. And second of all, it is our way to honor the memory of Prince, who, on a personal note, was a big, big musical hero of mine and someone that made a big impact on me in high school and college, listening to his music. So with all that being said, we're going to let you go. And remember, above all else, when you call up that shrink in Beverly Hills, you know the one, Doctor, everything will be all right. Instead of asking him how much of your time is left, ask him how much of your mind. Catch you next time.
We'll catch your ass down the road.
We are gathered here today to get through this thing called life. Electric word, life, it means forever, and that's a mighty long time. But I'm here to tell you, there's something else. The afterworld. A world of never-ending happiness. You can always see the sun, day or night. So when you call up that shrink in Beverly Hills, you know the one, Doctor, everything will be alright.